Labeling of plots is typically done either with options or sometimes in interactive editing. To describe how labeling can work, here's a line plot of some data showing the default labels, which for this plot consist of axes and tick marks and labels on the tick marks. The style of the labels can be controlled using the label style option. For example, this uses the label style option to specify that labels should be given with 16-point Times New Roman font. Other labels can be added using other options. For example, this uses the plot label option to add an overall label to the plot, and the axes label option adds labels at the ends of the axes. Rather than axes, it is common to put a frame around the plot. This shows that same plot with the frame option set to true and with the frame label option rather than the axes label option so that the labels are on the frame. Labels can also be added for individual points or features in a plot. For example, this input displays a list of data points with the labeled function inserted for one of the points, which has the effect of adding a label for that point. This input also includes the plot markers option to specify filled circles as markers for the data points. This input uses the callout function to add a different type of label. Callout works like labeled, except that a callout label adds a line between the label and the point. A related way of labeling points, which can be useful if the plot is displayed electronically, is a tooltip. This input maps the tooltip function over all of the data points, which encloses each data point in the tooltip function. The plot looks the same, but enclosing data points in tooltip adds labels called tooltips that appear when the mouse pointer is positioned over a data point. The default tooltip shows the coordinates of each point. A different tooltip label can be inserted using additional arguments in the tooltip function. Labels can also be added or edited interactively. The labels for the points in this plot, for example, can be edited by double-clicking to select elements and then editing or moving each selected element. The changes shown here done interactively can also be set up using additional optional arguments of the labeled and callout functions. If the plot includes more than one data set or more than one line, it can be important to label the lines. For example, these inputs give a plot that shows 3 data sets. The default list line plot output uses a different color for each line. The lines can be labeled using labeled or callout or tooltip, and these labels can in fact be combined. For example, this input gives a result with callout labels for each line, and for one of the lines there is a tooltip label that appears when the mouse pointer is positioned over that line. Another way of labeling the lines is with a legend. For example, this input uses the Plot Legends option to add a legend to identify the lines. So far, all of the examples have been line plots, but there are many other types of plots. The general principles for labeling, however, are the same whether the plot is a bar chart or a contour plot or a three-dimensional plot or anything else. For example, here's a bar chart of some data. The default chart includes tick marks and tick labels on the vertical axis, and the default bar chart also includes tooltips that show the value associated with each bar in the chart. Labels along the horizontal axis can be added using the chart labels option. For example, this shows the chart labels option and the placed function used to add labels that are placed below each bar and rotated to fit more neatly under each bar. The placement and the rotation of the labels is controlled by arguments in the placed function. This input also includes the frame option to put a frame around the chart, and a value for the label style option makes the labels a little bit larger than the default size. Here's another bar chart showing 3 data sets and with a legend added using the Chart Legends option to label each data set. There are other ways of laying out a bar chart. Here's a chart showing those same 3 data sets, but this time the bars are stacked rather than shown side by side, and the bars are oriented horizontally. The stacked horizontal layout is controlled by the chart layout and bar origin options. The legend is added by the Chart Legends option, as in the earlier example, and the labels on the left side of the chart are specified by the Chart Labels option. Another common type of plot is a contour plot. Here's a contour plot with a default frame around the plot and with tick marks and labels on the frame. The default contour plot also includes tooltips, so hovering the mouse over a contour line displays a tooltip label with the value of the function along that line. The contours can also be labeled with static labels. For example, this shows a similar contour plot with 2 contour levels specified using the contours option and with the contour labels option set to all, which puts text labels on the contours. In that result, the placement of the contour labels is chosen automatically. It's possible to specify the locations of contour labels using other values of the contour labels option, or the labels can be moved interactively by clicking as needed to select each label and then dragging labels to the desired locations. For one last example, here's a three-dimensional plot. In 3 dimensions, the frame around the plot is a box, and there are 3 axes with tick marks and tick labels. This input shows one possible way of labeling features in that plot. The legend is added using the Plot Legends option, and the choice of colors is controlled by the value of the color function option. In general, for any type of plot and any sort of labeling, a good way to get started on working out the necessary option settings is by looking through examples in the documentation. For example, here's the documentation for the contour plot function, which includes a good variety of examples of things that contour plot can do and different ways of labeling. Here's an example that uses a value of the contour labels option to give the labels shown here, with each label displayed on a white background. If this sort of labeling is similar to the desired labeling in some application, then this example could serve as a good starting point for getting those labels. Labeling of plots is quite a broad topic, and so there are actually several places in the Wolfram documentation to find more information. This guide page on labels includes links to options for plot labeling and links to functions like labeled and callout. This guide page on graphics options and styling includes links to information not only on labels, but on features for controlling colors and fonts and layout and so on. And finally, this guide page on chart labeling, legending, and annotation mostly includes links to information on labeling charts like bar charts, but much of that information applies as well to any type of plot.